After securing his spot on the United States Olympic team, Clayton Young posted a picture of he and his wife, Ashley, embracing after the race. Accompanying the photo was this caption: "In 2016, my dream became her dream. Now we are living it. Time to get a bigger dream. This is my favorite picture from Saturday. Unadulterated joy." End quote. While many watching the race only saw the success in the Young's journey, Ashley and Clayton both know what it's taken to get to this point, and they're determined to be grateful to the God who got them here. Clayton Young is an American long-distance runner who competes for ASICS. He is a BYU alum where he graduated in mechanical engineering and won a national championship in the 10,000 meters. He set a personal best of 2 hours and 8 minutes at the 2023 Chicago Marathon and became the 7th fastest American marathoner of all time. Earlier this year in February, Clayton finished second at the 2024 U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials, qualifying him for the 2024 Paris Olympics, where he will compete this summer representing the United States. Ashley Young is her husband's biggest supporter and, as he calls her, his superpower. Clayton and Ashley are the parents of 2 little girls, and Ashley shares what it's like to feed an Olympic marathon runner on her Instagram account, Feed Your Runner. This is All In, an LDS Living podcast where we ask the question, what does it really mean to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ? I'm Morgan Pearson, and I am so honored to have Ashley and Clayton Young on the line with me today. Clayton and Ashley, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us on today.
Yeah, this is great.
I wanted to start by asking you, when do you first remember thinking like, oh, it'd be amazing to go to the Olympics? And then kind of a 2-part question, when did that goal actually start to seem somewhat realistic?
Yeah, I have a very distinct memory in 2nd grade. It was the 2002 Olympics. So it was actually the Winter Olympics. And I remember watching Apollo Ono cross the line in silver. And I remember that was like my first memory of what the Olympics was, what it was like. Everyone was so excited about his performance and how special that was. And that's when I realized oh man, that would be really fun to go to the Olympics. And I think that was like the dream of every 2nd grader during that time. Obviously, it took a long time for that to become more of a reality in my mind. You know, I grew up playing lots of different sports, but ultimately found myself really good at running. And I would say it really didn't become a reality till only about maybe about 9 months ago. And in October for the Chicago Marathon, I had the opportunity to hit the Olympic standard. And I ran the 7th fastest time ever by an American. And by hitting the Olympic standard, it unlocked one of the spots for the United States. And that's when I knew hey, I have a good shot at this. And so that was in October of 2023. And essentially 3 months later, in February of 2024, was when the Olympic trials was going to be happening for the marathon. And so it was in that October window that I was like, you know what? Not only did I hit the Olympic standard, but now I have a good shot at the Olympic trials. And that's when the belief really started to kick in. I've had a lot of good mentors in this space. You know, I'm coached by 2-time Olympian Ed Eyestone. And so I kind of knew that was maybe in my cards in the future. And then also, I have a good mentor, Jared Ward, and he was in the 2016 Rio Games. But yeah, it took a long time for it to become just a dream to a reality.
Well, we live here in Philadelphia, and we just went this past weekend and watched the Penn relays. And it's crazy to me, just the condition that you have to be in to be at that Olympic standard. And so I am in awe of both of you and admire so much the work and dedication that you've put into getting to this point. Clayton, you served a mission in North Carolina, which I had to call out because I'm from North Carolina. And the Wall Street Journal wrote about your mission, and I thought it was fascinating. And it's been emphasized, actually, I think the Deseret News emphasized that they kind of took a different approach to writing about your mission and how it affected your fitness. The author talked about how it's important to have something in your life outside of running. However, I think anybody that has served a mission and is somewhat athletic knows that it also has to take a toll on your physical fitness. So I'm wondering, in what ways would you say that your mission helped you as a runner? And in what ways did it kind of set back your athletic pursuits?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety when serving a mission as an athlete, especially like, a BYU commit. And, there was a lot of indecision there on whether I should go straight out on my mission or whether I should maybe do a semester or two before going on my mission. But ultimately decided to like keep all of my eligibility years together. And so I went straight on my mission out of high school. And I loved North Carolina. And I love how the Wall Street Journal said, these missionaries gained 30 pounds and came back faster. Talk about a clickbait title. But it was cool to read that article and really think back on why I did serve a mission and, the pluses and minuses of it. Because, the article was right. Within my first area, I gained 30 pounds like that. It was so quick that I have these great missionary pictures of my chubby cheeks in, hot, humid North Carolina. And yeah, that's, I guess, obviously the downside, right? As a missionary, you only maybe get 30 minutes a day if your companion allows you to run. And sometimes you're just doing push-ups and sit-ups in the middle of the living room floor. And that's not really much for an endurance athlete. I would say that as I got home off my mission, I kind of got to see how my coach at iStone works with these athletes that come back from their missions. And, he served a mission in Barcelona, Spain, and I saw a lot of my great former teammates serve missions and get back in great shape. Those upperclassmen that had also gained 30 pounds and had competed really well. And that gave me a lot of motivation when I got back, knowing that I could get back in shape and that, Coach Easton was the best man for the job to help me get back in shape. But yeah, it definitely wasn't ideal. One of the things, though, that I think was obviously one of the biggest advantages of serving a mission was just, the work ethic and dedication that you learn from serving a mission. There's just principles that I think you learn by being on your own and setting goals, making plans and working towards those goals and plans and developing a hardworking mindset. And so while physically I came back in poor shape, mentally I came back in the best shape of my life. And I was ready to apply what I'd learned on my mission to my running. And in a way, it was kind of a blessing because my senior year of high school, I'd kind of gone through an injury. My senior year of track kind of was a wash. And so that time off was actually really perfect for me to kind of get back healthy and be ready to run on the collegiate level. You touched a little bit on this idea as well of the Wall Street Journal of running for something beyond yourself, that, having this eternal perspective approach towards running. And I obviously serving in North Carolina and not being there to get in shape, but being there to serve the Lord, I think really helped me recognize, especially when you're serving people, not only by preaching the gospel, but from a service standpoint, you realize that you have there's so much more to life than running. There's people that just are really in need of help, and just how critical the gospel of Jesus Christ and the family is to helping people live a fuller life. And as I've recognized that and more have had these titles of I'm, a missionary, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a parent, I'm a son of God. Those titles that I've learned to recognize in the mission really carried forward as I applied those in the rest of my life. And being a runner is important in my identity, but there's more titles than that are far more important.
I love that thought so much, and it's certainly in line with what President Nelson has taught recently. Ashley, I want you to share this next part. Tell me a little bit about how the two of you met.
So we attended high school together, and so I met him when I was in 8th grade and he was in 9th grade. He had a brother in my grade. At first, it was just, oh, that's Ty's brother. And then all through high school, I got to watch his running career. We were both on the cross country team together, and I had a crush on him the whole time. He was always really dedicated to his running and just a great friend in the friend group. And it was really fun. We would go to meets and I would be hanging out with my friends and he would be winning races. And I think from the very beginning, I knew that running was a huge part of his life and was going to continue to be a huge part of his life. So we were just friends in high school. And then once he was getting ready for his mission, we kind of spent a little more time together just as friends. And then while he was on his mission, I wrote him pretty consistently because I thought he was pretty cute. And then the mission age changed and I decided to go out. And he returned the favor and wrote me pretty consistently. And when we got home, we decided to start dating. And it was great to have those years of friendship before it became a dating relationship. And yeah, we got married.
And here we are. With that, Clayton, I love something that you said in one of the interviews that I read prepping for this interview. You talked about how when you and Ashley got married, that your dream became her dream, which makes a lot of sense that it would have to be that way because there's no way you get to where you are without a wife that is supportive of that dream and that goal. But I wondered, what were those conversations like initially? Obviously, Ashley, now knowing that you have been a part of seeing him run for a long time, it probably is a little bit more natural to adopt that dream. But how have you fully embraced that dream as your own? Because I think that's important. Like even in my marriage, my husband had this dream of going to business school, and that was never my dream. And so it had to become that. And so I think that's applicable for a lot of different people.
Yeah. I think I was really blessed to see Clayton love running for a lot of years before I was in his life. Yeah. Going back to those conversations as we were dating, as we got married, he was on the BYU team. He was traveling every 2 weeks. He would go out of town and come back, and we'd go on a couple of dates, and then he'd go out of town again and come back. So it was just really big all throughout our dating experience. And I could just tell that he was very committed. Something that I really love about Clayton is that when he commits 100%. And he showed me that before I ever entered that scene, right? So yeah, so we were dating and I got to see that commitment level, and then we got engaged, we got married, and then 2 weeks later he was traveling to another race. Like it really just was always a part of that. And I had seen other relationships on the team or around us. Clayton mentioned Jared Ward, and I watched the way that Jared's wife supported him, and I was really inspired by that. I watched the way that Lynn Eyestone supports Coach and how excited she is for all of the BYU runners and the way that she just has entered that world with Coach. And I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. I knew that Clayton was going to be in the running world, and I knew that I either got to join that or I got to watch from a distance, and I didn't want to watch from a distance. And so it's kind of funny to look back at myself from 2016 and to realize that I knew nothing about running. And I didn't know any of the other fast runners. I didn't know any of the fast times. I didn't know the best races. I didn't know marathons, right? And it's just been a journey of growth. And I have become a fan of the sport because I'm a fan of Clayton. And I feel like I can somewhat hold my own now and just really try to adopt his passion because I want to love what he loves. And there's something so satisfying about watching someone I love do something that he loves. And it's a beautiful thing.
Clayton, do you have any thoughts about why this goal, why it has meant so much for Ashley to buy in?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Sometimes we'll get ready for these races and we'll get out to these races, and it's almost like she wants to, like, for lack of a better word, like take credit for it, right? She wants to like be the reason that I'm having so much success. Ashley finds a lot of like validation in my success, and rightly so. Like I can honestly say that Ashley has been my secret weapon, and that like she has invested herself so fully into my success that it is fun to compete on a high level. so that way she can receive that validation. And I would say it's by honestly, it's by very small and simple means that she's really upped our game together in this professional space. And, to see the growth that she's had since we got married in 2016 till now has been really funny to see. It's just little things at a time. It's like I've slowly indoctrinated her, poisoned her to enjoy this running.
I now watch marathons with him. Who else sits on the couch for 2 hours and watches running?
Yeah, it's been cool to see. And yeah, I think it's pretty special. I like Ashley said, I've seen a lot of relationships in this running space, and not all runners have had the success I've had. And so I bet it's very difficult to support somebody that isn't seeing success. But because Ashley's commitment to this goal or this dream that we've had through 2 Olympic cycles, it definitely takes the pressure off me, right? That means that I get to just focus on what I do best and perform. And Ashley's not the first one to ask, when is this running thing going to be over? When are we going to move on? If anything, she's the one that's pushing me forward and egging me on to work towards the next Olympic cycle or the next big race or the next big goal or dream. She's the motivator sometimes when I need it most. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback on that. We've had a lot of conversations about how I find validation in his success. And I've come to terms with this idea of I'm better at supporting someone else's dreams than having my own dream. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I think that there are people in this world who are incredibly motivated and driven, and I am motivated and driven to help Clayton be motivated and driven. And I don't, it's just part of my character. I don't think it's something that I've done or that makes me bad or better than anyone else, but it's just, I love helping Clayton succeed. I don't know, if it's a lack of confidence in me or utmost confidence in Clayton. I'm not sure which one it is, but I find a lot of joy when Clayton finds a lot of joy. And so I'm very motivated to help him do well.
I think that's super admirable. And as you were talking, it made me think about spiritual gifts and how the scriptures talk about to some is given to believe and to others it is given to believe on the words of others, which some might view as not a good thing, but the scriptures refer to it as a gift. And so I think being able to help and cheer somebody else on in their dream, that is a gift. And I wish that I was better at that. So I admire you, Ashley, for being that way. There were so many things that I liked about what you all were just saying, but I actually really wish that people could see your face, Ashley, when Clayton first started talking about you finding validation in his running, because your face was so cute. The 2 of you obviously have to coordinate a ton to make this work. I think that's one thing for me. I found it interesting to think about how different your life, Clayton, probably is than a lot of the people that you're competing against. And so I'm curious how the 2 of you make it work with Clayton's training schedule and having 2 little girls. And what are the biggest challenges for your family as you go through this experience together?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, that my life experience in the professional running world is fairly unique. In 2019, when I went pro, I was probably one of the very few that were, married, had a kid, one on the way. It was this very, I'd go to these meets and all these guys would be a bunch of young bachelors that weren't married or didn't have kids. And a lot of these guys also go to these professional training groups. So they'll go and they'll move to Portland or Michigan or LA or even Flagstaff. And it's just like college 2.0 almost. It's just a bunch of young single guys that are training together to be the best professional athletes. Whereas I decided to stay here in Utah, right? And I decided to stay with Ashley and be near our family and have our kids and our family and this community that supported me. So it was a little bit unique. I will say that I had, Jared Ward, who was a big mentor of mine and kind of showed me how to do that. And I would say it's more common when you get older as a marathoner to do that. But when I started pretty young on the track, it's not as common. But yeah, in the marathoning world, I think we're finally entering this phase where we show up at these marathons and other athletes will have their families because most athletes will move from the track to the marathon. But it's been interesting to kind of more or less, be a little bit unique in my training plan. And you're right, like it does take a lot of coordination and planning. Like with Ashley, I would say one of the biggest things that we've really had to coordinate is just honestly feeding the animal that I am. And, in college and even as I finished up my college career, like I had a lot of those amenities provided for me at BYU. But then as I transitioned, and those were the first couple of years of our marriage, so Ashley didn't really have to worry about it. But now, as I became a pro athlete, Ashley had to take on feeding me. And not that was like her role per se, like not that she had like that I was like, hey, this is your job, but it was more like that's what she was going to do and provide. And so figuring that out has been a big undertaking for sure. And so she's really coordinated and planned meals and when I'm coming home, when I'm leaving, what meals are good for certain workouts or certain races at certain times of days, and the shopping and the meal prep and the planning. And that's been a lot of communicating for sure. And something that she's done really, really, really well at. And I know how to work really, really hard, and Ashley knows how to help me really recover. And both those together are what bring, I guess, the growth and success that I need to perform at a high level.
Yeah. I will say Clayton is not a picky eater, which makes my job a whole lot easier.
Definitely.
I can only remember one meal that he's like, I'm sorry, I can't finish this. And it was fish, so I didn't feel that bad. So he's pretty easy, and he's been really kind as I've grown with him. We had our first little girl in 2019 while he was still in school at BYU. And just like how we got married and 2 weeks later, he went to a race. We had our baby, and I think 2 or 3 weeks later, he went to his race. That was expected, but it was also hard. I think
for sure.
Something that's been really helpful through all of this is that we've learned how to communicate needs. We have gotten a lot better at it because we've crashed and burned a lot too. And I think I have taken on a lot of those responsibilities with the girls, especially as they were babies. I would take the night shifts, but that would mean that Clayton would take them during the day so that I could get a nap, right? Like we were balancing each other out when we really needed that help and what was most important and best for him. And now that we're kind of out of the baby phase and into the toddler phase, it's a little less taxing, but still a lot of communicating. Sometimes Clayton will come home and I'll be like, I've been negotiating with a 3-year-old all day. I need to get outside. And he's really, because of what running does for him and his mental state and his happiness, he knows that I need that too. And he's really supportive of me and helping me meet my needs too. So it's a balancing act. It's a dance, but it's caused us to, communicate well.
Kind of as a follow-up to that, Clayton, you said in a text to me that Ashley is your superpower. You mentioned that earlier. Many people would probably think it'd be easier to be single, like those guys that you described, or without children in your position. But I wonder how you would say that marriage and family has blessed your life and your running.
Yeah, Ashley definitely is my superpower. I think it's fun to go to these races and to bring Ashley along. And that's a little bit uncommon, but when people start to meet Ashley and understand all the little things that she does for me to perform, they almost fall in love with Ashley more than they fall in love with me at these races. And it's really fun to see that, now we're coming back for these races again, a year later. It's like they've already planned it out. They're like, and you're bringing Ashley and maybe bring the girls this time too, right? Like they've included, they recognize that we're like a package deal, and I'm going to perform better, and I'm going to also be a better ambassador for the sport with Ashley there, because she's going to handle so many logistics and just help me to navigate all of that. When you talk about going back and, having a family in this sport, I think it really goes back to my mission, right? Like when I realized that I was kind of grounded by the principles that were taught in my mission. It's the same thing with my family. I can go to a race, and if it's a really great race, My 5-year-old daughter doesn't care if it's a really bad race. My 5-year-old daughter doesn't care. They just care that I run fast and that I'm there at the end of the day. And sometimes when I come home off my runs or my workouts and, it's been a good day or a bad day, like they don't know the difference. They just care that dad is there. And that helps me, take a step back and recognize, just having this eternal perspective really matters. And they're the ones that keep me grounded. There's been a lot of hype and a lot of, media and a lot of interviews and podcasts with my recent performances, and can sometimes get a big head. But at the end of the day, when I come home and I have to wrestle with my 5-year-old to get her to brush her teeth and get to bed, like those titles don't matter, right? Like they're all stripped away, and really it just matters the relationships that I have with them. And that grounding is really important to me.
And their favorite thing to do is run the first block of dad's run with him. So they'll get on their shoes and go out and run fast with him. And it's cute. It's fun to see them in his space too.
I can't imagine the relief that it has to be to have that kind of grounding force where it's like, oh, these guys, they don't care. But I got such a kick out of your Instagram post, Clayton, after the Olympic trials, where you had the picture of your little girls and you talked about how your 3-year-old doesn't like sweat.
Yeah.
That her face in that picture, we're going to have to link that because it was just too good. You've talked about, and I may butcher how to say this word, the mundanity. Is that how you say it? Of excellence. Can you tell listeners what you mean by that and why that thought has kept the two of you going? I think this idea, there's a ton of relevance to it, just even as it applies to spirituality. So I'm curious if you could share some of that.
Yeah, the mundanity of excellence. What does that mean? And it's kind of an odd phrase. It comes from a man, I believe his name is Robert Chambliss, and he's somebody that did a study on Olympic swimmers. And he found that essentially swimming is just a really mundane sport. And you could say that running is the same. But the mundanity of excellence is simply the result of boring and repetitive tasks over a long period of time. And you can think about how excellence really is mundane because it focuses on, we say it all the time, but the process instead of the outcome. And the excellent outcome is often a result of the mundane process. So the more you focus on the mundane process, the more excellent the outcome will be. And I think we can really find a lot of mundanity in our careers and our life. Like you even talk about parenting, you talk about the gospel, you talk about the home, you talk about relationships. There's just so many mundane tasks that need to be done in order to achieve an excellent outcome. I love how many parallels there are to running and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, there's a lot of mundane things that we have to do. And sometimes you have to do the mundane things just for mundanity's sake. But as they slowly shift to, from, I guess, a checklist in your head to your heart, that's when you really start to see the excellent outcome from living them, the principles of the gospel. And it's the same thing with running. There's just a lot of cumulative miles. I run almost 120 miles a week, and that's a lot of time. And, I do sauna and weight room, and there's just so many things that I have to check that are just so mundane. But as I've done that checklist day in and day out, and kept this routine more than anything, the excellent outcome has come. I would also say there's this second principle that Robert Chambliss talks about, and the listeners might hate me for this because I'm an Olympian and, this is maybe a slap in the face, but it's this idea that talent is useless. And I know that some of you might think, well, Clayton, you're freaking talented. How could you say that talent is useless? But really, Robert Chambliss talks about how talent is a lazy explanation for success. And when we really break down where talent comes from, we can really attribute where we can find success. So for example, he says, talent undermines hard work and determination, and it hides true factors that can create excellence, such as athleticism, resources, money, transportation, influence of others, the availability of opportunities, and the other social factors that contribute to participation in the sport or life. And so when you recognize that talent really, there's things that you can control, and talent, there are things that you cannot control. And as you really label what those things are, you can focus on the things you can control and find success and excellence. I can control hard work and determination, but I can't control, the influence of others and social factors and opportunities, right? Like there are things that I can and cannot control, but merely explaining that away as talent does nothing. And so that's something that I've really embraced. We all have, different decks of cards dealt to us, and we get to decide what we do with it. And taking that sort of ownership of what we've been dealt and focusing on what we can control, like I said, makes all the difference.
So well said. Ashley, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I'm always impressed by Clayton's ability to do things over and over and over and over and over and over again. For example, he's been dealing with an Achilles issue for the last couple of weeks, and he does 180 basically calf raises. Like, I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but to me, it looks like he just stands on the edge of a stair and goes up and down and up and down. And he does 180 of those every single day, every day. And I don't know about you, but I can't even commit to doing 10 sit-ups a day. I am just impressed that he is just so consistent. And that's just one thing that he does. He takes his protein and collagen. He takes there are just so many little steps that he does outside of just lacing up his shoes and going for a run. And there's another phrase that his coach has said to him, which is consistent competence equals eventual excellence. And I think that ties right into this mundanity idea of it's just being consistently competent. You don't have to read your scriptures for 2 hours every day. You just have to do it every day. You don't have to have an Enos-like prayer every single day, but you do need to connect with God, right? And it's not about, blowing it out of the water every time. You just have to be consistently competent. And that's what brings that connection with God and success in an athletic sphere or work environment. And I think I'm just consistently amazed watching him every day.
Well, I admire that so much as well. You mentioned, Clayton, Ashley's willingness and dedication to feeding you. And you have an Instagram account, Ashley, called Feed Your Runner that I loved looking at and recognize that I probably could do a better job of feeding my husband who loves running. I have been impressed in interviews with whether it's CNN or Wall Street Journal or on your personal social media accounts that neither of you have shied away at all. If anything, it seems like you look for an opportunity to talk about your faith. So I wondered, is that intentional? And if so, why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's intentional. Like, I think when I look back to the time leading into the Olympic trials, I was like doing everything I could. And there was a point at which I recognized that I needed to do more on a spiritual standpoint. Like, I'd done everything I could. Now it was time to turn to God and see what he could do. And so it was just really on the forefront of my mind when I was doing all these interviews and podcasts. And it was just, like I said, it was just something that I could control and focus on. When you think about a marathon, there's 14 weeks of really hard, intense work. And then you essentially will taper for 2 weeks where you cut back your mileage and you're lifting and you're kind of filled with all of this dead time that you kind of need to fill. And so that's when Ashley likes to say that we turn it over to God and we really start to dial in the spiritual and the mental side of things. And I think it was just so much in the forefront of my mind that it was just so natural and normal to talk about. I think it's also something special, when I'm in Utah, I can kind of assume that everybody has heard about the gospel. And I can kind of get stuck in this mode where I shouldn't bring up my mission, or I shouldn't bring up, that I went to church last Sunday because, everybody has heard it and they're tired of hearing your mission stories and they're tired of having the gospel shoved down their throat. But there's something about, being in the middle of Florida and being on a panel and people asking you about it that that kind of just, gets me talking about it. And I recognize, how special, that mission was, or how special it was that I was able to prepare so spiritually for such a physical race and, draw those connections and talk about it afterwards. It's kind of like you don't realize you're guided until after the fact. I just went forth and I did what the Lord commanded me. And then afterwards, I kind of got to see how he did guide me. And that was pretty special to see how the Lord did guide me physically. And then afterwards, as I was able to represent something more than beyond myself, represent my family and my community, but then also Jesus Christ. And I think that really shows in those immediate interviews after the Olympics.
Ashley, anything to add on that?
Yeah, faith is such a grounding principle in our lives, and it's hard to hide that, right? Like it's something that comes out when we, talk to others, especially those who we meet at races who don't have that faith in their lives or are intrigued by, things we say or ways we go about our lives. And it's opened my eyes to what the gospel does for us and the way that Jesus Christ has helped us and lifted us and, carried us. And it's easy to kind of be blinded by that sometimes in Utah when you just go to church with all of your neighbors and it seems normal, but it's been really beautiful to realize how much Jesus Christ means to us.
It's beautiful. Clayton, you have experienced some pretty significant setbacks, including knee surgery just a year ago. And Ashley mentioned your recent Achilles struggles. How have the two of you maintained hope and stayed focused on your goal amidst those setbacks?
Yeah, I kind of laughed to myself because when I think back to my knee surgery, there was zero hope. To be honest, there was a lot of despair. There was I think of probably the lowest part of my life was in the middle of that knee surgery and shortly thereafter. It took 2 or 3 months for me to commit to knee surgery and to kind of accept the reality that I needed it. And that was really tough. And then to know that I'd have to go through rehab and give up running for even more time to get back to full strength. That was a daunting undertaking as well. And it's not until after the fact that I look back and I think wow, I was in a very low state. I was probably depressed and when you think about how running is not only my job and my career and my livelihood, but it's also my identity and it's my drug, more or less. You think of the amount of endorphins that I get from running. When you take all of those away, I'm left with very little. And so that was a very difficult moment. And so did I have hope in that moment? I mean, I think the hope came from just that mundanity of excellence that I focused on every day, right? All I could do was I can't run today, but I can do these exercises and I can do my rehab exercises and I can fuel my body and I can hydrate and I can sleep as much as I can. I just had to really break it down to what were the things that I could do. And then obviously doing as much as I could to get the mind right. Because I think the mindset towards surgery or any injury can make a big difference. The mind is powerful. And as I've practiced, visualizing the runner that I wanted to be when I was, sweating all over the stationary bike as I was cross training or doing these just mundane exercises, I think that visualization, that mindset is what allowed me to come back so quick. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty. And I guess there were opportunities to pour that into other endeavors in my life, pour my energy into whether that was being a father or whether that was, just serving at church and little things, trying to serve others. But I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. I think I definitely came out better on the other side and physically and mentally to be able to handle, the ups and downs that are to come, because there will be more. And it's not a matter of if, but when I get the next injury or the next setback. And So I've got a couple more tools in my belt, you could say. But
Ashley, what was it like for you to watch him go through those things? And I can imagine having a husband that is feeling, like Clayton said, like kind of depressed. That has to be hard.
Yeah. So his surgery came in February of 2023. He had started that injury, though, in December of 2022. And something we don't talk about a lot was that we were actually expecting a baby that year. And we lost our baby in the summer, 5 months and 20 weeks. And that was my lowest part. And so not only did he go through that really deep, dark time, but I had been in a really deep, dark time. That was just a really hard, a hard couple of months where both of us felt really low. And it's hard to say abandoned because we still felt love and we still felt some peace and we still knew God knew who we were. And yet we still felt depressed and sad and lonely. And so I remember just struggling a lot with those feelings of what does faith look like when everything is going wrong, according to my definition of wrong, right? Like, and what does trust in a loving Heavenly Father and what does the atonement of Jesus Christ look like when I'm hurting and I had desires that I thought were right and they're not happening. And when my husband is trying so hard and he's still hurt. And I just wrestled with that for so long. And it's hard to be in that place. And we cried a lot. And it was just hard. It's interesting being in this sphere where people see our lives and everything is beautiful and going right. And we're achieving our dreams. And look at this couple that's working together and communicating well. And it's like, well, you're seeing us at the mountaintop and there was a really low pit that was really, really hard. That was a slog and that was really hard. And going back to this idea of taking on someone else's dream that we talked about earlier, it's like, well, Clayton and I got really close because he watched me really struggle and he learned to validate my emotions. He learned to listen when I was grieving. He learned to love me when I was broken. And then I got to turn around and do that for him. And I hope I supported him the way he supported me. And it was really, I don't have any other adjectives than hard. People who are listening know like life is just tricky sometimes. And I'm grateful for the gospel that doesn't give us all the answers immediately. I'm grateful for a Savior who knows how to cry with people that he loves. And I remember just really struggling about not knowing how our story was going to end, but knowing that if I really had faith, I was supposed to believe that it would all be okay. And just struggling with that tension of like, well, I don't really know how it's going to work out, but I think I have faith. So I think I'm supposed to trust that it's going to work out. And now sitting in this place where so many things are going right, not that faith means that everything is perfect, not that struggle is only over when everyone else thinks you have success, but that there's been peace and a sense of love and connection with Heavenly Father through it all. Clayton's surgery came after a lot of heartache that we'd already faced, right? And it was this period of a lot of struggle. And coming out of that just took a lot of repetitive trust, repetitive actions, like, I think this is what we're supposed to do. So we're going to keep going, even though this hurts, or even though this doesn't make sense, or even though my body's not working the way I want it to. And just a lot of communication with each other and a lot of communication with God, even if sometimes that felt one way.
Well, I appreciate so much you sharing all of that, because I think sometimes it can feel like we only, like you said, like we only hear the mountaintop, like we only hear the people shouting from the mountain, like, look at what we did. And so I think it's really refreshing to hear about the valleys, or as you put it, the pit. I think that that's probably really helpful to many people that are listening. So when your episode airs, the previous interview will have been this interview that I just recently did with an author of a book about lament. And he talks about how the whole concept of lament is that you are expressing something hard that you're going through, but you're expressing it directly to God. So rather than like talking about God behind his back and complaining, you're taking that complaint directly to God and working through it with him. And I think there's something like incredibly beautiful about the idea of, like you said, working through what does the atonement of Jesus Christ look like in this situation? Because right now I can't see how it's all going to work out. And to me, that is like the beauty of the idea of lament. And he talks in this book about how it's all throughout the scriptures, and somehow we kind of gloss over it, but that people consistently take their hard times to God and let him work with them in that. So thank
beautiful. You. That is beautiful. I remember just struggling with the fact that I was struggling so much and not having a template for how to be frustrated at God, with God, to God, and not knowing how to express that frustration while still expressing faith. And like, it's so beautiful to have a word for that. And like, I think that as you were talking, so many examples from the scriptures came to my mind that I'd like never framed in that way. And I think that everybody goes through hard times and needs to know that it's okay to work with God through feeling angry or frustrated or sad at God.
Yeah.
Or with God. Yeah. So that's beautiful.
Well, I have enjoyed this so much. I want to touch on one thing, because I feel like if we were to go through this whole interview and not mention Connor Manz, it would be an oversight. And so you, Clayton, and your training partner and fellow Latter-day Saint BYU alum, Connor Manz, you were first and second at the Olympic trials. And like you've mentioned, you also have Ed Eyestone and Jared Ward, who have been mentors. I wondered if it makes any difference to train with people that understand the faith aspect, the spiritual component of your life, in addition to the physical.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with you talked about Jared Ward and Coach Eyestone. But yeah, Connor Manz is all in the gospel of Jesus Christ. He really is wholeheartedly holy, and he wears his faith well. Like he is a good disciple of Jesus Christ and a great example to me. I love it when the other day I was going to a meeting and he was supposed to be there too, and we pull up and he's hopping out of the car and he's in a suit and tie, and I'm like, hey, where are you coming from? He's like, he's just coming from the temple. Like he's just a great example of just doing the little things, not only in running, but also in the gospel. And him and his wife have just been so serviceful as well in their callings of the church. They're busy people and they're good examples of that. But yeah, when you talk about Connor, as I was going through knee surgeries and Achilles injuries and all these ups and downs, it was Connor for sure that was, the one checking in on me. He was the one asking me how I was doing health-wise. And he's the one that's asking me like, well, did you get a blessing? Well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And just a faith approach towards training can be really powerful, especially when it's with your training partner. And we're one of the few programs that, doesn't run on Sunday as professional athletes, and people probably think we're crazy for that. And I think now they're looking at us and thinking, well, maybe we should be taking Sundays off too. And that's been pretty special to do as well. But yeah, it definitely helps. And I think even just like the other day, Jared Ward texted Connor and he said, hey, I ran into this alumni the other day at the temple at 6 a.m. on Friday. I think I'm going to start going every Friday at 6 a.m. He's like, do you want to join us? And it's just those little challenges that just keep us all accountable to each other, not only in running, but also in our faith. And it is so common for us to be on a run, when we're just doing easy mileage, and just to have conversations about the gospel and where we are at with the gospel and the highs and lows of it. And that's been pretty special.
I think that's so cool. It's so cool to hear kind of that behind the scenes. Okay, my last question before we get to the all-in question. Before the Olympic trials, you posted, I think it was you, Ashley, that posted about training starting to taper. And Clayton mentioned that earlier, that before a big race, the training starts to taper off. And you posted the things that your family was doing to prepare on race week. And that included spiritual preparation. I wondered, as you prepare now for Paris and for the Olympics, what that spiritual preparation, whether you guys have any ideas about what that spiritual preparation will look like, or things that you're intentionally trying to do as a family to be prepared for such a significant moment in your family's life.
Yeah, as I was writing that post, it was something that Clayton and I had talked about beforehand, and we had set some goals. And as I was writing that post, I realized that yes, there were a few things that Clayton and I had specifically planned, like, oh, we're going to go to the temple on this day and you can do this. But I realized that a lot of the things we were already doing consistently, like it wasn't just in this 2 weeks that we were going to be reading out of the Bible and the Book of Mormon and going to church and, doing these things. It was like, oh, we've done this every week of the build. It's just that we are emphasizing this now. And that was a really important moment for me to realize that we do this every day and that this is something that permeates our life and isn't just a last resort, right? And so, yeah, what does our spiritual preparation look like going into the Olympics? Well, Clayton reads his Book of Mormon every night before he goes to bed, and we will be at church every Sunday, and we have family prayer every night, and we talk to the girls about Jesus Christ every day, right? Like, it's going to be something that factors into our life every day. And I love that. I'll let you answer more specifics.
But like when I think back to the build before the Olympic trials, something that I was really struggling with was this idea of comparison. When you think about, there's 200 plus guys on the start line and there's only 2 spots to make it to the Olympics. And I have myself and I have my teammate Connor Manz. And, we essentially have to go 1-2. And, I had a lot of problems comparing myself to Connor Manz. And then obviously there was a lot of media and social media and Strava posts of other elite athletes. And, I started to get really worried as I was comparing my training to their training and their mindset to my mindset. And it was very daunting. And that's essentially when I really started turning my training over to the Lord. Those last 2 weeks as we started to taper, there wasn't a lot that I could change physically, but I knew there was a lot I could change mentally from this comparison standpoint that was like zapping me of confidence. But as soon as I read this talk from a BYU professor on comparison, and it just talked about how the race is not with him, the race is with yourself. That him could be Connor Manz, that him could be any of those other 200 plus runners. The race is not with them. The race is with myself. And as I started to compare, Clayton Young of February 2024, right before the Olympic trials, to Clayton Young of February 2023 on a surgery bed, getting knee surgery, like that's where I started to build confidence, not only in myself, but in the plan that the Lord had set for me. For over a whole year, like I could look back distinctly and see, oh, the fact that I was able to get so fit and so fast over this year's time, like there's no way that the Lord could not be involved. And that comparison immediately went away and a lot of gratitude set in. And I just had the best mindset on the start line of that race that allowed me to perform on the highest level. And so now fast forward, to the Olympics this summer, what am I going to be doing? Well, I'm sure I'm going to, those last 2 weeks, I'm going to start comparing myself to this runner and that runner and Connor Manz and my teammate. And it'll get a little daunting, but I'm excited to go back to read the talk, to take some time pondering on the path that the Lord has kind of set me on this last 6 months and see what he has done with this time, from my Achilles injury to getting healthy all the way into the Olympic Games. I know it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be cool to look back and to see what the Lord has done with my training and my time and to hopefully be able to share that and be an ambassador, a disciple in Paris. And that's what I'm excited for.
Well, I think anybody that watched the Olympic trials, I think the thing that was so cool to see, Clayton, was how much joy you were running with. And you were like high-fiving people. It was just like so fun to watch. And so I love that the source of that joy is in large part, I'm sure, to Jesus Christ, and recognizing the Lord's hand in your life and in your journey and in the lives of your family. Guys, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. My last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
To me, what it means to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ is, I got to take it from a running standpoint. And I feel like most runners or people like me are very A-type personality. We're perfectionists. We're too focused on works and not enough on grace. And so when I think of the words like all in the gospel of Jesus Christ, all in kind of gives me anxiety. I get a little bit anxious about that, And so to me, it means being all in on the grace of Jesus Christ and trusting in that plan, and not all in on my works. And as I've thought about that, that's what it really means. Understanding that as I've trusted in his plan and in his grace, my works pale in comparison. And yes, I want to be the best person I can be, but it's really as I focused on him and being all in and who Jesus Christ is as my Savior, as my Redeemer, and as somebody that is on this journey with me side by side. That's what I have focused on, and I need to continue to focus on with somebody that is too hyper-focused on the works that I do and not enough on the works that the Lord has already done for me. And I think that's what it means to me to be all in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Clayton. Ashley?
That's beautiful, honey. I've loved thinking about this. And yesterday, as I was talking to the girls, we were talking about prayer and how when we pray, we feel connected to Heavenly Father. And I asked them what connection means. And they talked about their magnet tiles and how their magnet tiles connect and how their necklaces connect. And it was just so cute to see that on a childlike level, and then to try and teach them to extend that to Heavenly Father and to their Savior, Jesus Christ, and what connection looks like with a person. And we talked about when we feel connected, we feel loved and we feel safe. I love that in connection with this idea of being all in, right? Being all in on this connection with them and doing everything I can to stay connected and feel connected. I think right now, like we said, we're in this experience where things are going well, right? And it's easy to feel like we did it all ourselves and then to immediately be humbled and say, no, God put us here. God gave us this. We tried really hard. And for some reason, he has elevated us to this experience. And then to think back to a year ago when everything was going wrong and to feel alone, and then to realize, no, God is with us. God has not abandoned us. Our Savior is still there. And this idea that that connection doesn't have to change regardless of what is happening in our lives, and that I can choose to be all in and to be connected with them regardless of what life dishes out. And I really strive for that relationship and to have that peace regardless. And yeah, I think about President Nelson's statement of joy can be found regardless of the circumstances of our lives. That when we choose to be all in on that relationship, that is a reality.
Thank you both so much. This has been such an enjoyable conversation for me, and I appreciate both of your time very, very much.
Thanks, Morgan. This was wonderful.
We are so grateful to Ashley and Clayton Young for joining us on today's episode, and look forward to cheering them on this summer during the Olympic Games. Big thanks to Derek Campbell of Mix at Six Studios for his help with this episode. We'll look forward to being with you again next week. In the meantime, if you enjoy All In, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening.